أعزائي طلبة وطلبات شهادة الثانوية العامة، أهلا بكم. اليوم سوف نتطرق إلى درس جديد في مادة الجبر والهندسة الفراغية، وهو اسمه الزوايا المتجهة للمتجه في الفراغ. طبعا احنا عندنا الفراغ في 3 أبعاد. Welcome my dear student in our math program for secondary 3. Dear student, today we are taking new lesson in solid geometry. Its title, Direction Angle of Vector in Space. Direction angles and direction cosine of vector in the space. Dear student, direction angle of vector A are theta x, theta y, theta z. Direction angles of the vector A in space are theta x, theta y, theta z. Direction cosine of this vector makes with the positive direction of x, y, z axis respectively is cosine theta x, cosine theta y, cosine theta z. Remember, we have direction angle and direction cosine. Any vector as a vector has 3 direction angle: theta x, theta y, theta z. Also has direction cosine: cosine theta x, cosine theta y, cosine theta z. A vector equal norm A vector cosine xi plus norm A vector cosine theta yi plus norm A vector cosine theta zk. Remember, dear student, A vector has 3 terms. The first, norm cosine theta x in direction I, norm A cosine theta y in direction j, norm vector A cosine theta z in direction k. We have common factor norm A. Then the vector A we can express by norm A vector multiply bracket contains cosine theta x in direction I plus cosine theta y in direction j plus cosine theta z in direction k. Dear student, when we find A vector over norm A vector, we find the result cosine theta x in direction I plus cosine theta y in direction j plus cosine theta z in direction k. We have 3 dimensions, x, y, z. Look at, dear student, theta x contains between OZ and OX. Theta z between 2 planes. Also, vector A inclined by OX by theta x. Also, vector A inclined on OY by theta y. Z in OZ inclined by angle is called theta z. This rule is very important. When we find cosine, we use vector A over norm vector A. Remember, dear student, we can express about any vector in 3 dimension space as norm vector multiply cosine theta x in direction I plus cosine theta y in direction j plus cosine theta z in direction k. When we find norm A by using this equation, we divide also A vector by cosine theta x plus cosine theta y plus cosine theta z. This A vector over norm A vector is a unit vector in the space. Norm vector is unit vector. We find the vector divided by norm. This vector is called unit vector on direction A. What is the unit vector B in direction B? Vector B over norm B. Any vector, if you find unit vector in same direction, we find the vector divided by norm the vector. Also, cosine theta xi plus cosine y theta yj plus cosine theta zk is a unit vector. Why? Because A vector over unit vector, also the unit vector A. Dear student, in this example, very important. Look at when we find the norm vector or unit vector in direction A, we find the vector A divided by norm vector. Remember, in the space we have three directions: cosine theta x in I, cosine theta y in j, cosine theta z in k. Remember, what is the A vector over norm A vector equals unit vector in direction A. When we have vector A as 3 component 3, 2, 1 as a first, we find the norm of the vector A and divided by the vector A of each component to find the unit vector of A. Look at the properties of unit vector A. This vector is called unit vector in direction A. Remember, A vector over norm A vector equal cosine theta x I plus cosine theta y j plus cosine theta z k is called unit vector in direction A vector. When cosine power 2 plus cosine power 2 theta y plus cosine power 2 theta z equals 1. This rule very important. When we find cosine power 2 theta x plus in direction I cosine power 2 theta y in direction j plus cosine power 2 theta zk equal 1. Why? Because unit vector square root of the first power 2 plus second power 2 plus third power 2 equals 1. This unit vector. Now we are translate to example. Find the direction cosine and direction angles of the vector A 2, negative 2, 2 root 2. Remember, dear student, what is the required? Direction cosine and directions angle. What is the direction angle? Cosine theta x in I, cosine theta y in j, cosine theta z in k. What is the direction angle? Theta x, theta y, theta z. If we find cosine theta x by using calculator, we calculate theta x. Shift cosine answer to find the value of theta x and theta y and theta z by the same method. Dear student, we have vector A 2, negative 2, 2 root 2. We find the solution of norm A. At the first start from the norm A. In this example, we have vector A, 2, negative 2, 2 root 2. At the first, we think to find the value of norm A. What is the value of norm A? Excellent student. Square root first power 2 plus second power 2 plus third power 2. Answer is 4. This norm of the vector A. After that, unit vector in direction A. What is the rule? A vector over norm vector. What is the A vector? Excellent student. 2, negative 2, 2 root 2 over 4. What is the value? Cosine x. Excellent student. The first component. 2 over 4 equal half. What is the cosine theta y? Negative 2 over 4 equal negative half. But cosine theta z, 2 root 2 over 4 equals root 2 over 2. Remember, dear student, cosine theta x equals 1 over 2. What is the theta x? Excellent student. By using calculator, we find shift cosine 1 over 2 to find the value is 60. Why? Because what is the angle which cosine, its cosine equal 1 over 2 theta x. Also, cosine theta y, by using calculator, theta y equal shift cosine negative 1 over 2 equals 120. Also, cosine theta z equal root 2 over 2. What is the angle? It's cosine root 2 over 2, 45. After that, to calculate theta x, theta y, theta z, these angles of direction. Then, direction cosine of the vector A are 1 over root 2 over 2. To calculate angles theta is direction angle of vector A are 60 degrees, 120 degrees, and 45 degrees. Why? Because cosine theta x equals 1 over 2. Then what is the theta x? 60. Cosine theta y negative 1 over 2. What is the cosine y? 120. Also, what is the cosine theta z equal 45? We deduce that theta z equal shift cosine root 2 over 2 equals 45. Then we deduce that direction angles of vectors A are 60, 120, and 45. Remember, dear student, there is difference between direction cosine angle and direction angle. Cosine, direction angle mean find the value of cosine equal 1 over 2, negative 1 over 2, root 2 over 2. But direction angles is what is the angles which its cosine equal 1 over 2? 60. What is the angle which its cosine negative 1 over 2? 120. What is the angle which its cosine 45 is root 2 over 2. Now we are translate to another example. If we have 135, 60 theta degrees are direction angles of the vector A. Find the value of theta if the norm A equals 6. Then find the vector A. Remember, this example is very important example. We have theta x 135, theta y 60, theta z is theta. What is the required? Find the value of theta. And if the norm of this vector A equals 6, find the vector of A. Remember, dear student, this important example. We have rule. What is the rule? of this example, this rule, a vector over norm A vector equals what? Cosine theta x, cosine theta y, cosine theta z. By using equation, we solve the value, or to find the value of A and the vector A. Look at the situation. Since 135, 60, theta are direction angles of the vector A. Remember, direction angles of the vector A, 135, 60 degrees, theta degrees. Then we find cosine power 2 theta equals what? X and student equal 1. Why? It's norm vector A over norm A is unit vector equals 1. Unit vector, what do you mean of the unit vector? Its unit vector value is equals 1. Then we form equation cosine power 2 135 plus cosine power 2 60 plus cosine power 2 theta equals 1. What is the value of cosine power 2 135? 1 over 2. This 1 over root 2 power 2, 1 over 2. 1 over 2 power 2, 1 over 4. Cosine power 2 theta equals 1, equals 1. Then the left hand side equals equation 1 over 2 plus 1 over 4 plus cosine power 2 theta equals 1. By using simplify to find cosine power 2 theta equals 1 over 4. Square root 1 over 4 equals what? X and student cosine theta positive or negative 1 over 2. If cosine theta equals 1 over 2, in this case theta equals 60. But if cosine theta equals negative 1 over 2, X and student theta equals what? Equals 120. Then we have two values of theta. Theta equals 60 when cosine theta equals 1 over 2, but theta equals 120 when theta equals 120 when cosine theta equals negative 1 over 2. After that, direction angle vector A are 136 60 60 or 135 60 and 120. Why? Because we have theta has two angles. If theta first quad is 60 degrees, but if theta lies in second quad equals 120 degrees. This direction angle of the vector A. After that, we translate to find the vector A, 6 cosine theta x or 6 cosine 135i plus 6 cosine 60j plus 6 cosine 60k equals what? Negative 3 root 2i plus 3j plus 3k. Or by using theta equals 120, we have other vector A. Vector A equals 6 cosine 135 in direction I plus 6 cosine 60 in direction J plus 6 cosine 120 in direction K equals, by using cosine 135 equal negative 3 root 2 in direction I. 6 cosine 60 equal 6 times half equal 3i. Also 6 cosine 120, cosine 120 equal negative 1 over 2 times 6 equal negative 3k. Then we have vector A by two branches. The first branch when theta z equals 60. Second branch when theta z equals 120. Look at, dear student, another example. Look at, we have in space OX, OY, OZ. A vector inclined to Z by 40, XY plane by 70. The opposite figure represent vector A whose norm is 10 units. Remember, represent vector A whose norm 10 units. How to express the vector A in algebraic form or Cartesian components? Number 2, find the measure of the direction angle of vector A. Find the measure of direction angle of A. Solution. Dear student, when we solve a vector into two components, the first is in the direction of Z with magnitude AZ equal norm A vector cosine theta Z. What is the norm vector? Is 10. What is theta Z? Is equal 40. Then the component of this vector in Z direction equal AZ 10 cosine 40 equals 7.66. After that, the second in XY plane. In XY plane, AXY norm A sine Z. Sine 40, norm A 10, answer is 6.428 by using calculator. Then resolve the component AXY into two components. The first on OX with magnitude AXY cosine 70 equals 6.428 cosine 70, answer is 2.2. The second in OY with magnitude AXY sine 70 by substitution about AXY 6.428 sine 70, answer is 6.04. Then after that we find AX, AY, AZ component of the vector A. The Cartesian form of the vector A becomes AX in direction I, AY in direction J, AZ in direction K. By substitution, about AX 2.2, AY 6.04, AZ 6.66 in direction K, the vector in Cartesian form becomes 2.2i vector plus 6.04 j plus 7.66 k. After that, to find the measure of direction angles, we get the unit vector in the direction of the vector A. We know that unit vector in direction A equal vector A over norm A equals 1 over 10. Why? Because norm vector is 10. In example, the norm vector is equals 10 from the given. Then multiply 1 over 10 times 2.2i plus 6.04j plus 7.66k. Answer is 0.22i plus 0.604j plus 0.766k. What is the cosine? Theta x 0.22. Then what is the theta? Shift cosine 0.22 to find 77.3 degrees. Then when we find theta x, we use calculator by cosine -1, the value of 0.22 to calculate 7.3. This is the value of theta x. By the same method, cosine theta y 0.604, then theta y equal cosine -1 0.604 by using calculator equals 52.84 degrees. Also cosine z 0.766, then theta z equals shift cosine 0.766 equal 40 degrees. Now we are to translate to another example. Dear student, look at the opposite figure represent cuboid whose dimensions DC equals 8 centimeter, BC 6 centimeter, OC 5 centimeter, or 3 dimensions. Cuboid has 3 dimensions, length, width, height, 8, 6, and 5. Force F, magnitude 200 newtons, acts in direction of diagonal OA. What is the required? Express the force F in algebraic form. Remember, direction force act on OA or diagonal OA. Second, find the measure of the direction angle of the force. Dear student, we have a vector 6i, aj, 5k. Why? We have 3 dimensions, x, y, z. The vector A, its component in x 6, in y 8, in j, in z 5. Then we put vector A as 6i plus aj plus 5k. Since we find the norm of the vector A by using square root the first power 2 plus second power 2 plus third power 2 equals 5 root 5 length theorem. This norm of the vector A. After that, the unit vector in direction A equals A vector over norm A vector equals 6 over 5 root 5 in direction I plus 8 5 root 5 in direction J plus 1 over root 5 in direction K. Then the force F in algebraic form expressed by this method. F equals 200 multiply bracket contains this value of the force 6 over 5 root 5i plus 8 over 5 root 5j plus 1 over root 5k equals final answer of F magnitude 48 root 5i plus 64 root 5j plus 40 root 5k. Then the direction cosine of the vector A equals what? As the form 6 over 5 root 5, 8 5 root 5, 1 over root 5. This cosine of direction A. Dear student, by the end of the lesson, I am very happy to spend such time with you. Remember, math simple, think, work, produce. Goodbye.